In the late 14th century, a well-off Parisian man married a younger woman, and he wrote a book for his young bride, filled with advice and guidance on what he thought might be useful for a woman who had been thrust into this position of managing a household, and talked about what he thought would be expected of her. The book is usually called Le Ménagier de Paris, and it contains, among other things, morally instructive stories, guides on horticulture, guides on hawking. It also contains a section about provisioning the household, which includes menus and recipes. And as an aside, the author has usually been identified as a Parisian bourgeois, but in the 1990s, Nicole Crossley-Holland made a strong case that he was in fact Guy de Montigny, a knight once in the service of the Duc de Berry. She put that in her book, Living and Dining in Medieval Paris. Now, since I'm a food historian, the bits that interest me the most, of course, are the ones about the food, about the dining and the recipes and the provisioning of the household. But they really are lovely books. Now, there's a French edition by Brereton and Ferrier, which has the Old French. It's essentially just a transcription, but it can be a little bit hard to get a hold of. And of course, if you don't speak French and have at least some idea of how to approach medieval French, it's a little awkward. But there are two good English translations available. The first by Eileen Power and the second by Greco and Rose. That would be Gina Greco and Christine Rose. They both have much to recommend them, but I would recommend the Greco and Rose if you're looking to get a copy. It's the more recent version. The scholarship has moved on since the Power edition came out, so it's got a little bit more context for that. It's also complete. The Eileen Power edition left out the section on hawking and possibly one other section. So if you want the complete thing, then in English, then Greco and Rose is the way to go. Now, interestingly, Le Ménagier de Paris is what it's called, but the Power English edition was called The Goodman of Paris, and the Greco and Rose is called The Good Wife's Guide. And that's a very interesting take on it, because one is focused on the author, the Ménagier, the Goodman, and the second is focused more on what the book is for and who the audience was, the wife, the young wife. But in both cases, we're talking about a guide. So Le Ménagier de Paris is this guide about household management in 14th century Paris. Now, I'm not dressed in 14th century. I'm making a faint nod in the direction of the 16th century at this point. But the material in the book is good and useful. And I like the idea of it. It's got a lovely tone, and it's helpful, talking about stuff that this young woman might not know. Which is why I've taken liberties with the title, for the title of this series of videos. I'm calling it Le Ménagier de Downham Market, because I do not live in Paris. I live in Downham Market. But the idea is that it'll be me rambling on about medieval stuff, about food, quite often about medieval food. And sometimes it'll be about unrelated other materials. But that's the idea, that's the focus. So thank you for tuning in. And the first episode is already up, in which I talk a little bit about leeks. Thank you for tuning in.